everyone, and welcome to this watercolor tutorial. And today we're going to be painting this ginger man taking a warm bath in some hot chocolate. So we do a lot of the wet on wet technique just so we have soft blends. We do some wet on dry techniques to get some fine details, as well as the scooping technique, which is a really fun one to try out. Let's get started. So this right here is my Winsor Newton watercolor paints that I have taken from the tube and put it inside this palette that I got off of Amazon. I have a tapping cloth right here. It's always good to have one. That way you don't have excess water on your page. I also have my 2 water cups right here. One I use for cool paints and one I use for my warmer paint colors. I also have right here my dryer. I like to use this to speed up the process between layers. These are the brushes that I use. These are the silver black velvet. I have size 12, 4, and 8, and these are the round tip brushes. I'm using this painting as an example. I always like to have painter's tape on hand. I like to paint down my paintings. It's easier to, 1, film, and 2, also just keep everything from moving around and it getting a little messy. It also helps to protect your desk, which you'll see mine is very worn, so it definitely does help with that.
You want to download the sketch for this painting, head down below to the link in my description and you'll be able to print it at home.
Okay, so to get started, we're going to do the wet on wet technique here with the cup. So I'm going to really quickly, again, you want to be fairly fast here, put down water, going around my edges here. And I'm not doing the bottom of the cup, I'm not doing the handle, I'm just doing the body of this mug. Trying to stay within my lines here. So if you take too long on one side, the other side will start to dry. So I'm trying to keep everything nice and damp. Okay, so with my cadmium red, I'm going to come in and I'm going to start to paint. I'm going to start on one side and then I'll start to move to the other when I'm done. And then I'm going to leave a little bit of an open space over here towards my middle for a highlight. Trying to move fast so the water and my color doesn't dry, because I want to do a little bit more detail work. So I'm moving pretty quickly here. Coming around my little gingerbread's hand. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in with a bit of shadow color. So I've just mixed some red and purple together in my palette. I'm going to come around my edges while it's still wet, and I'm going to shadow. Underneath the hand, I'll give it a little bit of a shadow. I'll come on this side with a little bit of a shadow. Under my handle, I'll let shadow. Maybe just underneath my drippings, we can have shadowed a little bit. Okay, so some of the parts is already dry, as you can see. If that ever happens, you can just come in with a little bit of water and just blend it out. And then for the center part, I'm going to come in with just water, and I'm going to start to just soften up this line that I have, just picking up and blending out this line for the highlight. You can also come in again in other places and add a more vibrant red. I just wanted to get that first color down. So that you really just make your colors pop. And the same thing for my middle. I just gotta soften out this line. And I've left the paper to shine through. That is called white space. So you should have a nice gradient of your color. You should have like your nice bright red for your cup, and then you'd have your medium zone, and then just your lightest zone right there in the middle. Okay, I'm actually gonna make this just a little bit smaller. I think it's just a little bit too big. And grab my brush and just blend out this line. There we go. I'm a lot happier with this. Okay, I have to let this dry. I'm also very much a smudger of my painting, so I'm gonna dry this so I don't smudge it. If you want your cup to be very bright and vibrant and just so bold, you can actually just repeat what we just did again, and these reds and colors will just pop. I might do that towards the end. I'm not sure. I just kind of want to get all of my first layers down first, and then I can reevaluate if I'm happy with what I have. That's typically how I like to paint. So although I might come back in, right now I'm just gonna keep working along. So I just put my water down here to do that wet on wet technique again. This time I'm gonna grab that burgundy color, that nice dark shadow color that needs to be a little bit darker right now. And I'm gonna put that one down right here. I'm gonna mix a little bit of indigo because it's just not as dark as what I want it to be. Yeah, there we go. Bringing it down a little bit, and then I'm going to come in. And the wet on wet technique, I don't think I talked about at the beginning. It's just when you have a wet surface and then you paint on top of it with another wet surface, which just creates soft blends between your colors. Especially if you're using beginner watercolor paper, it's typically the technique that I like to use. Paper dries really, really quickly, the watercolor paper, if you're using a beginner one. So whenever I'm painting, I am using beginner watercolor paper for this one. I just will use the wet on wet technique. That way it just buys me some time. I get less streaks in my painting. I'm going to add just a little bit more shadow here. There we go. And I'm going to do the exact same thing over here in this little section right here, except for I am just going to paint it. Actually, I'm going to use a shadow right in there as well. Okay. I'm going to let this one be. And the next thing I have to do is my handle as well. And I'm just going to do a very similar technique. I'm going to grab some water, put some water down, and you'll see I'm working in sections here. I find that it's easier to manage a small section versus just going add it with everything. So I'm managing to do a little small section here for my handle. I'm going to use that nice red, bright, vibrant color. I can already tell I have too much water on my page, so I'm just going to scoop up some of that water so that it's easier to work with. Okay, so with my red, I'm going to come around my top part in here. I'm going to leave a little bit of an opening, I think right here, for a nice highlight. And then with this burgundy color, I'm going to come in and create some of my shadows right under here. Under here, a little bit of a shadow. I'm going to get rid of everything on my brush. I'm going to scoop a little bit using that scooping technique just to pick up some of a highlight. And then we can just let this dry. Okay. I'm going to dry all of this again so I don't smudge anything. So to do a recap, we did the wet on wet technique right here. We left white space, which is negative space, and let the paper really shine through. Over here, we also did the wet on wet technique, but this time right here for the highlight, we scooped with a damp brush. So those are the two ways that we can leave highlights in our painting. It's by leaving negative space and just blending out any harsh lines, and also by just scooping while it's still wet. If this was dry and I tried to scoop, it just wouldn't work. So the next thing that I'm going to do, I think I'm just going to work on the brown hot chocolate part. So I'm going to come in and mix a darker brown color. So for me, I'm using burnt umber and raw sienna, and I'm going to mix those colors together, and I'm going to come in and paint my hot chocolate. You can also use the wet on wet technique here as well. I'm just moving section to section. You're gonna see I'm not outlining my outline or my sketch. I'm doing cohesive brush strokes, moving the watercolor as I go. So I'm not gonna have streaks. Again, especially if you're using, I'm losing my words. I just forgot what I was gonna say. So I'm just blending out this little line, this little shadow that I just put down, and I'm gonna come around and fill this out. Oh, I hate when that happens, when you lose your train of thought. Now I'm trying to think about what I was trying to say. And I'm shadowing in here while it's still wet as well. And I'm definitely going to be adding a little bit of a shadow over here with my candy cane once I've done this little corner. Okay, trying to look around. I think there's a little part just right in here that I didn't sketch. Okay, boom. That's the hot chocolate part done. So the only thing is I actually really like this color for my actual gingerbread man. Oh no. I'm gonna add a little bit of that color with some red for my gingerbread man, and I think what I'm going to do is have my hot chocolate just be a hair darker. So I'm gonna do 2 layers here. This part is optional just because I don't love the color that I picked. So I'm just gonna come in and layer on top. So you'll see here now that I'm layering, it is automatically darker than the color that is underneath because that color is always going to shine through. That is just the fun part of watercolor. It's a very transparent medium. So that color that's underneath will shine through and kind of change how this color looks that I'm putting over top. So like I said, I just mixed this color with just a hair of red. I want it a little bit more brown. I'm gonna put some water in it. I'm gonna put actually a little bit of black or gray in it. And I'm gonna use this color. And actually, I'm gonna do the white on white technique because I really don't want streaks here. And I'm just gonna paint over all of it. Except for this little hand part I'm gonna leave. If we have masking fluid, I should have done masking fluid for this, but oh well. Okay, I'm gonna come in and start painting my gingerbread man. I'm gonna come around my edges here, just add a little bit of shadow in some spots so it just has a little bit of dimension. Blend this part out. I'm gonna paint the arms. Since it's a smaller area, I'm just painting over top. Using the wet on dry technique. Again, just adding a little bit of pigment here just to have some dimension here with my gingerbread. Okay, I'm gonna dry this again so I don't smudge it. Okay, so the next thing that I'm going to do is I am going to just add some fun little buttons. I'm coming in with some red. I'm gonna come in with some green. For the edges of the icing, I am going to shadow it. So I'm coming in with a blue. I'm gonna add a little bit of gray. Just kind of dull it down a little bit and a lot of water. And I'm gonna come around the edges here and just touch different points, leaving lots of white space. I don't want to completely cover. I want to leave some gaps. I can even get a damp brush and just scoop up and move some of the icing color. But it just definitely needs a little bit of a shadow. So for the icing in here as well, we can come around different points and just touch, especially towards the top, with a little bit of a shadow. Blending out any harsh lines that we don't like. can even come in with a little bit of indigo. But the key here is just making sure that we just don't completely cover it with the blue. We want there to be a little bit of white space. And just blending out any harsh lines with some water. And I'm going to shadow the back area as well, because this is going to look like little drizzles here as well. And then again, keep that center nice and clear, blending out any lines that we don't love with some water. And then I'm going to dry this part, and then I'm going to do the back of the gingerbread cup. So while that was drying, I just mixed up a deeper burgundy color, and I'm going to apply that color in the back. And I want it to be darker than the color on the outside of the cup, just so that it just helps with the depth and dimension. It is further away, so we're going to have it stand out and pop by just having it darker. And we have to let this dry. You can see that the painting's starting to come together now that we're putting those final details in. Okay, so the next thing that I want to do is I think I just want to deepen my shadows just a little bit. I think they're a little too dull. So I'm going to come in with a little bit more indigo, especially towards the top edges here. I just want to add just a little bit more shadow. And just blending, blending, blending. Okay. Okay, and then we're going to do that same technique for our little marshmallows as well with our white. So I'm coming in with my blue, and underneath my little curve area is where I'm going to be shadowing the most. So I'm going to come in right underneath my marshmallow and around the edges, because marshmallows are a curved object, towards my bottom. And then you'll see I have harsh lines. This is the wet on dry technique. To get rid of those harsh lines, you literally just touch the edge. You don't have to go inside the part that you just painted. Just like what we did down here, almost just moving around pigment so we have soft edges and blends. And because white absorbs some colors, you can even come in with just a hair of brown and add that to the marshmallows, because it does pick up color. I can come around my edges over here as well on this side and just shadow out any harsh lines that we might have. Leaving the top primarily nice and white, but definitely just needs a little bit of a shadow. And then I'm going to let this dry before I do the back one. So I'm just going to hit it with my dryer, just so that I can move on. So I want this marshmallow to look like it's further away. So I am going to make this marshmallow shadow just a hair darker. I'm going to grab some water, and I'm just going to do the wet on wet technique with this one to kind of just show you guys the difference. So I'm going to come in with a little bit more of a stronger pigment. I'm going to touch this edge of my candy cane and this little marshmallow right in here. Just let that softly blend out. I'm going to come around this edge. Again, my goal here is to make sure I am leaving some white space. I don't want the whole marshmallow to look like a big blue blob in the middle of my page. I'm using a damp brush now to kind of control where the bleeding is happening, making sure I have some soft blends. And then I'm going to come in with just a hair of light brown, especially towards my bottom, and just add a small amount of just brown on that marshmallow. All right, I'm going to dry this. Okay, so you can also do like one marshmallow, come down here, and then let this dry and then jump around. You don't have to just use the dryer. I'm just kind of focusing on one area, so I am using the dryer. For the candy cane, I'm going to come in and do, you guessed it, the wet and wet technique again. And I'm going to fill this with water. I want to capture the curve of the candy cane, which is why I'm doing what I'm doing right now. I'm coming in with the wet on wet technique. And the goal here is to make sure the center of my candy cane stays nice and bright. I do not want to have my shadow colors come in and touch my middle. So I'm going to come in really quickly with some of that shadow color. I'm going to touch the edge, one edge of my candy cane. And I'm going to come around and touch the other edge. Again, I want to try my best to just leave some of my center open. If you're finding that you have no control over where your blue is going, when you touch the page, it just went towards the center, it means that you just have too much water on your page. All you got to do is get rid of everything on your brush, have a damp brush, and then you can scoop up the middle, and that should get rid of any of the extra water that's giving you a problem. I'm going to come in with a little bit more indigo just to kind of sharpen up my lines a hair while it's still wet. I don't like how dark this is. See, I smudged it. I always do that. And I am going to just blend out and just help this line. And you'll also see here, I've gone nice and light. I am not coming in with a full pigment blue. You won't be able to get the effect that you're looking for if you do that. So you want to make sure that you're coming in with a light wash, which means more water than pigment on your page here. So nice and light. I'm happy with how this part looks, other than my little smudge, which I'll just fix later. I'm going to keep going, and then I'm going to dry this before I put any type of decoration on my candy cane. All right, now it's the fun part. Now we can decorate. So I'm going to come in, I think right in here. Yeah, I'll just start right here with some red. And I'm going to speed up my video for this part once I show you what to do. So I now have my red right in here. To get a nice highlight in the middle, you're going to get a smaller brush that's just damp, and you're going to come in and just pick up some of that pigment. So you have a nice highlight in your candy cane. And if you really want to go crazy here, you can add a little bit of that darker burgundy color towards just the edges. There we go. And so I'm going to speed up my video. I'm going to do this all the way around my candy cane. So right here with the candy cane, I used that scooping technique. We did a lot of shadowing, and the reason why I was able to get really nice effects on my red as well was because of that underpainting where we had our shadows already down. So remember how we talked about if we do another layer on top of here, just make it like more vibrant. I think it was over here too. It just kind of changes the color. So that's exactly what happened here. Because there was already blue underneath this, it already changed how this red was looking. So that's a good technique with watercolor as well. So really the only thing that we have left to do is down here and then just decorating our gingerbread man. So to get started, I'm going to come in with a little bit of red. I want to go bright red so that it stands out. This is such a nice red. I love it. I'm going to come in here and do red. And I'm going to do a red over here as well. I'm going to get rid of everything on my brush. And you guessed it, I'm going to scoop to have a nice highlight here. And I'm kind of scooping around my X zone, where those X's are. I'm going to come in with a little bit of that indigo color and then tap around the edge here. Shadow just a little bit. Okay, and I am going to dry this. I just want to pick up a little bit more pigment over here. And then I can dry it. So now that this is dry, I can see I just missed a hair of the cup. So I'm just filling out that little cup area right in here where that little line was. Okay, now I get to do the fun part and use my green. So I'm going to mix up a nice green and I can fill this out. With my other brush, I'm going to scoop a highlight here. Using that wet on dry technique, applying wet paint onto a dry surface. That's why my colors right now are super bright and vibrant. I'm going to come in and scoop. I can also scoop on the vein as well. And scoop in here. I can even come in with a little bit more green and just kind of add a bit of a shadow behind this one right in here. Okay, you guys, we're on the home stretch here. I'm going to pull up this burgundy color and I'm just going to fill out this little X. That burgundy color. And I am going to finish my gingerbread's face, and then I will be done. Actually, I'm going to add a little bit more depth. I'm going to add a little bit more green on this side, leaving my center. This is me just being picky. I'm going to come around here with my red. Just so it stands out a little bit more. Doesn't look so flat. Okay, now I'm going to do the face. So I'm going to come in with my bleed proof white. And I'm going to fill in its little mouth. If you don't have bleed proof white, you can come in with like white acrylic if you have some white gouache, or you can just paint it a different color. You can paint it black or something like that. I'm going to actually use this same shadow color because it's a little red tint to it in the icing. I want to use the same color for its eyes. I want to do 2 layers here. So I'm going to dry it. I'm going to do another layer. Actually, I'm going to grab my white gouache. And just use some white gouache here. And I'm going to let that first layer, though, shine through a little bit, just to give it a little bit more pop. The icing a bit of dimension here. It doesn't all just have to be straight white. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with this. You guys can fill out your background. I'm going to just clean up this little area right here. Just try to lift up this color.
If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. Check out my other videos, and happy painting.
I'm gonna have to go grab a napkin.